We have a wall of worry, which we've been showing for about 2-3 days, which basically is just a list of all the things that we should worry about. We'll get that up for you in case any of our viewers were a little bit too optimistic this morning. But amongst it, we have central bank ammunition. We have, of course, the trade concerns and some of the foreign policy. We have the China slowdown. We have the yield curve. I mean, out of these, right, negative debt pile, what actually worries you the most?
I think, to me, what the greatest concern is the pressure that is coming down from populist economic policies, from governmental policies, particularly, of course, the China-US context, and the pressure this generates that's coming down on financial and economic structures. This is, this is undermining confidence. It's hitting growth. It's leading to safe haven flows. All the things we've talked about, everything we're seeing, is ultimately a reflection of this pressure bearing down from populist economic policies and politics generally, geopolitical risk. If you look at the risk geopolitically at the moment, we follow these indicators or create these indicators, and it's at a very high level. We have an unusual amount of hotspots, in a sense, geopolitically across the world.
Is there anything that looks okay out there? I mean, and again, just to put it into context, I know we keep on showing it, but if you look at the 210 spread, it's inverted in Japan, Germany, the UK, and the US. That's another chart that we have that we need to follow on. But is there anything that actually leads to optimism?
Well, I thought you might ask me that this morning when I woke up, and to be honest, it's hard. The one thing I would point out on an optimistic note is that it's actually quite remarkable how well, particularly the US economy, has held up in light of all these things that we've talked about this morning. So I wouldn't say so much, there's any good news in what we're seeing here in terms of market signals or economic data. There really isn't very much. If you look at the latest data out of Germany, it's very poor, for instance. But I would say that despite all this, despite the pressure coming down from policies and politics, actually the global economy continues to hold up, and the US economy in particular has held up remarkably well.
Okay, talk to me about Europe. So first of all, there's all this question about euro, the currency is still a funding currency. And of course, if there's pressure out there, it rises and it gives maybe a little bit of concern to the exporters. But Christine Lagarde is taking over November 1st. I mean, what can she do differently to Mario Draghi to make sure that actually this economy at least stabilizes?
Well, her biggest challenge will be if we actually do hit a recession or a sharp slowdown or worse, some sort of a crisis, because she will then realize, and she knows this, of course, that really there is very little, if any, ammunition left. You could see this despite the big compression. US yields, German yields only went down about half that much. And that's, to me, a clear sign that we're hitting rock bottom in terms of how low you can drive interest rates in Europe. So therefore, and this is our paper, the next, what comes next? What's the next regime? And my guess is if we go into that environment, we're going to see a regime change in monetary policy that's as big a deal as the one we saw between pre-crisis and post-crisis. And one element of this, an important one, will be a blurring of fiscal and monetary activities and responsibilities. And actually, for that type of environment, if we go into that kind of policy regime, Christine Lagarde, frankly, is ideally qualified. So it may well turn out that her appointment ends up being a very fortunate thing in the future, just the way Ben Bernanke was very fortunate to be the chairman, or we were very fortunate to have him be the chairman of the Fed at the time, since he was the greatest student of the Great Depression. So I think if we go into this world where fiscal and monetary inevitably become blurred, and one has to deal with how you operate in this environment, then I think we will find that Christine Lagarde is actually the ideal next president of the ECB.